let me show you how to go about figuring out how to get these bottle tops onto your pottery. So let me show you the basics. These cages are ubiquitous. I've tried several brands. They all seem to work. They're all very consistent to whatever beer bottle standard they're being made for. You just stretch them on like this, pop them in the holes, just like that. Nice and tight. So the trick to this whole thing, when you're wanting to put these on your pottery, is to figure out exactly the center of this hole to the top of the rim for your clay for the taper that you choose. If you made this in a really skinny cylindrical form with absolutely no inner taper and a hole, say as big as this white button, then the taper would almost be irrelevant. It's not going to sink deeper or not, but if you have any taper for any width, you can see that these can sink down slightly. So this might be the perfect distance for this taper, but if it was slightly wider, this lid would be down a little bit lower and the hole would correspondingly need to be lower to account for that. So that's why figuring out, based on which taper you choose, what the height of the hole is critical. Secondarily, all of these cages have these wires that come down, these kind of hooks, and it was not obvious to me at first that I honestly thought that it would just simply clear and it wouldn't be a problem. That was not the case. So you can see on all of these bottles I've come back and taken a divot out to clear for that cage. They all have a divot, this one less so, but they all have a divot for clearance. The difficulty with putting that divot in is it's hard to guess. You can see in this case I have these big cutaways, and in fact I almost missed it. That is right at the absolute top. I mean, it still works, it's great, but I don't like the idea that you're being so precise on figuring out where this hole is, and then you're just going to come in with a loop tool and carve away an excessively large spot right there and still run the risk of missing it. So it's important to figure out, in relation to the other two measurements, the exact spacing of this. So to facilitate that, I want to show you, these are actually bottles that I was using myself. Let's see here, let's see, this is large, small, and medium. I've done several versions of these. So this is an older version of what I was using to make these bottles. This was the winning combination. I eventually moved to laser cutting these. I didn't like the round, I wanted a blade shape, and this is 3D printed. It takes a while to 3D print. It wasn't necessary. But nonetheless, on the wheel, before I wire it off, the very last thing I do is I set the taper all the way up right to where it rubs on the top rim, and I leave it alone. I wire it off, I leave it alone. I make little marks in the clay because I need to make those marks and set this taper while I'm throwing it. I don't want to come back and leather hard while there's some shrinkage already happening and try to mark it then. You make your marks while the clay is still wet. Then you come back, and in a couple different fashions you can make these indentations. You can see on these bottles I simply put my finger down there and I took the back end of a paintbrush and just made a dent, and it makes these kind of bumps on the inside. I don't, you know, at first when I made these all three of these bottles are very much this way. I thought to myself, oh, that's not so bad. I can live with that. And in fact, maybe, you know, you're looking at it and you think, oh, clearly some dude stuck a tool and pushed it in right there. Maybe that's cool. But honestly, these holes are already so small that I didn't want any more restriction. I didn't like the visual effect. I'd rather have it be a smooth opening. And so to do that, I found that using a drill bit in your hand, just twisting it, and the size of the drill bit matters. So you may want to try more than one, but the tighter the fit, the more consistent the whole thing seems to work. So here's an example of a bottle that looks, I've already given away the punchline, it does not pinch down tight enough, and it is nearly identical to ones that work quite well in terms of hole height. So even as little as a millimeter difference in getting it wrong makes a difference in whether this thing is going to work correctly. It's why it's important to go in with some known measurements and go through all the way through firing and glazing, and to see what your firing schedule and your clay body are doing in terms of shrinkage, because a tiny bit off and all of a sudden this thing doesn't work. And you could screw around, I guess, trying to bend the wires. These wires are really tough to bend. I was surprised. I honestly thought I'd be able to just tweak them and make everything fit. No way. And it's not worth it. These aren't terribly expensive, these cages. It would just be nice to have a bag of them, know that you're going to make them where they work consistently, and you could grab one and pop it on your piece. So to do that, here's an example of the final collection of the tools that I was using, and I'm going to put this up on the website and sell it inexpensively, so, you know, it wouldn't be difficult to ship it. And you can, if you want to give it a go and you don't want to make your own templates, you can try to do this too. But the idea is, you know, you set your taper. In the case of the final version, each size will have two different taper slopes, but the opening at the top is the same for each size. And then you take and make a mark where you're going to come back with your drill bit, and you come back and you make a mark where you're going to come back with a tool and carve away the shoulder just a little bit. And you may not need to do this. You may find that you're throwing a bottle form that's really skinny all the way up, and these will clear. You don't need to use this kind of function, but it is there, and this distance is different for every tool, so it's you know, it'd be complicated to keep track of all those. It's just easy to have them on the same bit. So what you would do, if it's not obvious, is, and you don't even need to throw bottles, you can absolutely just throw the tops with a small amount of clay, and if you were to, you'd probably want to pop out one or two of these in the medium or small sizes, and one or two of these. And in the case of these test bottles, one taper I tried two different heights on, and again, these were really early ones. I think that they were really off. They just were not going to function at all, and I realized I had to rescale everything to even get in the ballpark. But that's the concept. Try multiples on your test piece. You could probably get as many as 3 different height sets. In fact, I'm sure I have a bottle around here somewhere that has 3 on it, but nonetheless, these were front of the line, so that's what you're seeing. So I wanted to point out that these are made out of plywood. They could also be made out of acrylic or something else that would be more durable, but I've chosen to make them out of plywood simply because in the end, most of these pieces you're probably not going to use once you've made your first set of test bottles, and then you can use your winning combination and either take a measurement and keep track of that, or you can reach back out to me and say, hey, can you make me a couple of these in acrylic so that they'll last a really long time. Now, I would be surprised if you wouldn't be able to use these for a year or two. I would not recommend letting them sit in a bucket of water or soak. You're going to stick these in while the bottle is slowly spinning on the wheel, so you're going to get clay on them, and you're going to get clay in the letters, and you're going to rinse it off and clean it, and that's all fine. I haven't had any problems with warping or delaminating, but it is plywood, so just be aware of that. And I'm not going to take the time. I want to offer these inexpensively to you, so I'm not going to take the time to sand off any smoke marks you can see on the back when the laser goes through it. kind of leaves a smoky bit there, and that's just how it is. So again, you can check them out on my website if you like. I'm going to throw a cap in too, so at least you can make some test bottles, try it out, see what fits. And again, I've tried 3 different brands of these caps, and they're all really made to the same standard. They've all fit the same hole size. So go check it out. justinsmakery.com. And I did add a new tool section to my website. This is the only tool I'll be selling right now, but you can go and see it there.